fat trade paperback, flocking to the
I am joined by the amazing Allison O'Toole, Dan Price, Andre Owen, Fred Kennedy,
Chip Zdarsky. Chip, thanks for coming.
What's up, folks? I'm your host, Konrad, on Wednesday Night Reviews. And once again, for our bi-weekly meeting, we are joined by Keith Grachow for My Sketchy Goodness. Keith, thank you once again.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you feeling today?
Pretty good. I've been, sorry, I'm just bringing up our live feed here and making sure we don't have sound.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, bleeding through, yeah.
Here we go. Yeah, I'm good. I've been like on a tear with it when it comes to saltwater, so gotten some really good page drawn in for the last week, so I'm kind of trying to milk that. It's
okay.
You know, like I think we talked about what happens when you're just kind of working through and you're not feeling it, but you got pages or whatever to get done and you're on a deadline for it. So, and now I'm kind of flipped where I'm like just in the zone, and I'm you know, and when you're in the zone, the great thing about that is, especially if you've structured the pages, the thumbnails in a good way, like the inking or the pencil inking of the process is gonna happen pretty quickly. We talked a little bit. We talked about this last time with Scott Hanna, where he is like a crazy inker. Yeah. He goes through like 4 pages a day or something, or 5 pages a day, or 3 issues a month. You know, like and a lot of creators, comic book creators, can relate to that. When you're like brain and hand are connected almost effortlessly. Yeah, when they're just in sync with each other, you can you're just drawing at a much faster speed. You're not thinking, you're not second guessing yourself. You're just kind of your mind's eye is focused. You can see what you're drawing really well. Your hand is just working really well with your brain, and I mean, I think that comes to creators. Some creators easier than others. Some creators maybe in that zone all the time or a good part of the time. Some creators, it's very fleeting, or they never get there. I feel like I'm in the middle. Like I'll go through times when I'm in the zone for like a week, and then you know, it could be like 3 weeks before I get back into that zone, and then there will be a little taste of it where you know, maybe I'm good for like an hour in the day, or I'm in the zone, and then it just leaves me, or it takes me like the whole day to get into that hour in the zone. Yeah, like I can't quantify it, but I feel like it happens to me more frequently than it did in the past, where I'm actually more attuned to what I'm doing for longer periods of time. But a lot of things kind of have to line up for you to do that. You have to, at least for me, have to be, I think part of it's probably a good headspace. Part of it's having good habits. Part of it is just being healthy. All those things that kind of, nothing to distract you from, you know, getting to the table and drawing. You know, I mean, and life can get in the way of you know, even if everything's lining up, and then something, you know, like you have a flood in your house, you're like, okay, great, what do I do? You know, you have to deal with that because that's life. And then, you know, that just takes you out of that zone you're in, and, you know, it's back into it. So I'm curious to know if there's anybody else, anybody who's going to listen to this or watch this, if they're, how often they go through it, what they do to get into it, how they think it happens, right? You know, all those things that are the intangibles of it that I think it's often the question that you get asked, like, how do you create a comic book, and how do you draw, how do you do this? You're constantly asking me, like, how do you do this? And I'd say a lot of it you can kind of explain. There's a lot of structural things you can kind of talk about, but some of it's a little bit hard to pin down because I can't explain necessarily how I get into this, like where everything is just really focused, at least for me. But there's some creators out there that can get there, and they may know how to get there very easily. And it's curious, do they have like something that they, like, is there something they do that gets them there, right?
Yeah, maybe like a little ritual that helps tap the mind in and get everything relaxed, like almost like learned states. Like I know that learned states are very real, which is how sometimes someone who is maybe a bad example, but for instance, normally a very poor bowler, but after a couple beers, they're very good at it because they've usually gone to a bowling alley, had a couple drinks with their buddies, and now they're bowling. They've learned to do it from that state. I wonder, maybe there's something that can trigger it. I also kind of wonder, now that you sort of mentioned it, kind of like that, and then how to get into that state and having to figure out how to attain it. If there's like, and maybe you could speak for yourself, obviously, but do you ever, how like you can be driving home from work, say, and like mentally you're not driving, but all of a sudden you're at home and you're like, how did I get there? Do you ever do that with the drawing?
Yeah, that's a hypnotic state. Yeah, it's I've heard that comparison before, and I probably made that comparison myself. It's the other one. Like that's I think that's one of the really beautiful things about the when you are drawing or creating, and you're so in tune to what you're doing that time flies by, and before you know it, 3 hours of just jumped ahead. And like and that happens to me on almost a daily basis, where I'm drawing, and like I've drawn a panel, and an hour's gone by, and an hour and a half's gone by, and I didn't even realize it, right? And that's like it's a really it's really beautiful, especially if you have anxieties or some kind of neurodivergencies where you're constantly in pain, and this is a way for you to get to escape that, I guess, or to manage that, so that you're sorry if I'm going peeking out a bit, because Sid is in a state where he's like, whatever reason, he wants to roam, and he's blind and deaf, and we don't really want him to be bumping into stuff, right? So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's a really, he is off again. What is it that you need, buddy? Here we go. He's got his little new ring here.
I love it.
So when he's like, he's been fed. What is it you need, buddy? He went to the bathroom pretty recently. Could be, or maybe I put him over here.
Maybe he's just sat through enough of these episodes. He's like, I want something different. I'm going to go explore the house now.
Yeah, well, listen, we would love for him to be able to do it. He can't see and he can't hear. So we can't communicate with him, be like, hey, dude, don't do that. But yeah, there is something quite beautiful about being able to just create something without being aware of the passage of time and not worrying about anything other than just what's in front of you and creating. And especially when what you're creating, you're really enjoying, right?
Yeah.
It feels good. It has like a nice feel to it. You've worked hard at it. And we've talked about AGI, and that's, part of the you're kind of cheating yourself of that, right? To be able to say, oh, I created something from nothing. You're kind of tricking yourself a bit if you think you're creating something using other people's art in a way that's not, using your own skill set, or using, I don't know how much skill set goes into prompts, but very literal, very, very minimal.
It's funny you mentioned that. So earlier today, in after our interview, I'll post the third set of pictures. I was on a little road trip with Cross-Eye Comics or Doug Knight and Fellhound. And we actually started talking about AI, and I mentioned you're very passionate about it, and sort of I mentioned the fact that we had talked about it previously on an episode. And Doug is actually in the chat, Cross-Eye Comics, just saying, "Sup, guys? Just checking in on the stream." Now, for the folks watching who are nerds like me, they'll know what you're drawing. But let the folks know what it is that you're going through here, and if possible, show the reference, because you are drawing from reference.
Yeah. So I'm using a couple of different references. I probably didn't need to use the secondary one because I already know the pose, and I already know, and I used it earlier today. But so the one I'm using is it's on my other screen. So you just bring up Mega Man. Just find a Mega Man. I'm not using any particular Mega Man. I am looking at one particular, but I'm not really using it. I'm just using it for like the details of the clothing and stuff.
Okay.
But and then the other one I'm using, I'll bring it up. It's a program I use, like a
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a cool little. It's a posing program I use. It's hey dude, you got to stay in one position. I don't know. He may need to go to the bathroom, but he's gonna have to wait a little. You're okay. Anyway, yeah. So you asked for me to draw Mega Man, and I can't say I've ever drawn him before. I don't know if I've even played the game. I probably have at some point, but not in a long time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The reason that I find that interesting is given the work that you've done in advertising, given the fact that, like myself, you're a nerd, and you would have grown up in roughly the time when, like, I was, or not when I was, but like when Mega Man was readily available at, I figure, the age where you were late teens to mid 20s.
Yeah.
I figured that would have been like a thing where, just being a nerd, you would have done it. But I mean, that's the cool thing about how we all do our thing. Also, real quick on YouTube, Zach's Gaming World says, "Hi, Uncle Keith."
Hey Zach, how you doing, buddy? So it's my nephew.
Well, Zach, thanks for tuning in. If you're watching, Keith is currently drawing one of my favorite video game characters, Mega Man, whom I have a feeling is probably far older of a character than when you've been playing. At least based on the assumptions I'm making about you, Zach, and your age.
Yeah. I mean, he may know who Mega Man is. He plays video games, but I've played video games since I was a little kid, but I'm also not a gamer at all. Like I was around when you had, the first Atari systems out. This is the early 80s. So, I remember, I think I had Texas Instruments was the one system I had. I know we had the Nintendo when that first came out in like the late 80s, the mid to late 80s. Friends of mine had like Coleco. We may have even had Atari. We may have had Atari. I can't remember. I'll have to ask my dad. I can't remember that. Or he may have had it or something. But yeah, like was into it, and of course you had the arcade versions of those, and I worked in an arcade for a while. So, like I, it's hard not to have been around that kind of stuff. But personally, like I like playing video games, but then I also know that I get really frustrated with video games, or I get a bit obsessed with them. Like there's at some point it goes from like, oh, this is fun, to like I'm really wasting a lot of time figure something out that's making me frustrated. And so I there's other things I think I'd rather do with my time in my free time, because I don't have a lot of it. So I've decided to fill it with like reading comic books or books, or going on hikes or traveling or whatever. So like that's where I'm at. But nothing against anybody who's into that stuff. I've never, and so going back to this, Mega Man, I may have had the video game at one point, but I probably hardly played it. I probably bought it because it was on sale or something, and then I probably like some games I really really liked, like Metroid. I really enjoyed.
Solid.
But not the 3D one, the side scroll. And so there's some games that I know that the people, there's like, they talk about it with reverence. I'm like, I've never played it, or I may have just, like I played the Mario Brothers and Super Mario Brothers and Donkey Kong, but I never went past that. I never got into Mario Kart or Super Mario.
Oh, okay.
Any of the where it got into more of the 3D versions of it. Like, and then the other thing that I never got into was like the playing like when you're playing with a group of people, right? Like when you're part of an immersive world where people playing all over the world, characters that either they're trying to they're on your team, or they're trying to shoot you or whatever. I never got into that. That's something that I never really, so when people talk about that, I don't really have a lot of reference for it. So yeah, I'm a geek, but also or a nerd, but also at the same time, there's not a lot of things that I can say I'm like super, super, super into that I have a lot of, I've immersed myself into. Comics is probably comics, and maybe like movies and TV shows, and music, I guess. So
yeah, but I mean, as evident here, with good reason. Awesome. I love it. And you know what? Hey, maybe Zach can come over sometime and give you a little tutorial on the new age, the new wave, but not so much as to get you addicted.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, he does like Roblox and all that kind of stuff, and I'm sure that there's I don't know if he's gotten into like some of the other games or not, but I'll see him soon, so we can talk about that stuff.
Right on.
So yeah. But anyway, so yeah, like you wanted me to do this guy for you, Mega Man, and I can't really say no a whole lot about him. So you can, have they even done like any kind of like a movie with? They haven't done like a movie or anything, right?
Not a movie. So Mega Man, the version you're drawing is like classic Mega Man. So there are in the series that he's contained in, there's 11 of them. Not counting. Actually, I guess there's like 13 or so. But that starts way back on the original Nintendo. So like the I think the mid 80s. And then by 93, I think so. Yeah, by 1993, a secondary sequel series called Mega Man X comes out. Um, Changes the controls, but basically enhances the graphics. And that's a whole huge thing. And there's like 10 of those games. Um, and yeah, like it's been adapted into a couple of comics. Actually, I have those comics. They've made it into a TV series based off of the comics. But yeah, they've never really done a movie. I'm not shocked though, because it is very rooted in anime. Like the way that the characters are drawn, like just from the way that even you've drawn the eyes, because you're drawing from reference. Very much so feels like anime, and I don't think it would translate well to like a live action movie for sure. Although I appreciate what they did with the Sonic films, I highly enjoy those. They're very fun. I just don't see them making Sonic into, or not Sonic, Mega Man into a movie, because basically every game, and Keith, there's like, I swear to God, there's actually total 40 or so games, I think. But basically every game consists of a big bad guy somehow convinces or takes over 8 robots. Those 8 robots, which are usually some form of working robot, so like a robot that does construction, a robot that blows stuff up for usually construction, a robot that controls fire for, you know, building something where it would be really bad for us to do it. 8 of those guys get turned into or taken over and start terrorizing people, and Mega Man goes around, fights them, defeats them, and gains their powers one by one, until he can eventually confront the big guy who's taken over, which is in this version of Mega Man that you're drawing, is a guy's called Dr. Wily. And then you beat him, and then he apologizes profusely, and then the next game starts, and he does it all over again. And there's like 10 of those, or 11, and some spin-offs. But yeah, it massively iconic character. So I just kind of, yeah, I don't know. It's one that I love, and I like finding artists where once I've figured out sort of how I feel about their style, yourself included, I go, okay, cool. What would be something that like I know Keith could do, but push just beyond the barrier of what I think he would normally do. So like a long time ago now, Jason Lapidus, I asked him to draw The Rocketeer, because it leans a little too more into like the fantasy or sci-fi element, but it's still sort of in line with what I've seen him do, with what I've seen you do on Saltwater and with your other works. I know you can handle Mega Man, and it's just a little outside of that norm, and I'm like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's see what he does.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you know, obviously there's different approaches. I can make this a little bit more cartoony if I wanted. You know, I could have made him more realistic, kind of going a little bit in the middle there. You know, there's, you know, I think a lot of artists have that capability of making things like cartoony or versus, or they can go a bit more realistic. I think just depending on what's being called for. You know, like you see, so there's artists that you go, and you know, comic book artists where you're like, oh man, like everything they do is like really super realistic, and then you look, they sell like a comic of theirs, or like a sketchbook of theirs, and there's like a lot of doodly stuff in there that's really super cute, and you're like, oh my god, I didn't know you could actually do that, right? And so it's one of those things where I think a good artist has that versatility. They can do it if they want to, but you know, it's not always something that they're asked to do, I guess.
Exactly, right? And like that's, I think once in a while, because so far it's pretty much been either you're working on something or you just start doodling, doing your own thing, which absolutely been a joy to watch, and I love it. But at the same time, yeah, like let's give you something different to do. Let's see what we can do. That being said, you were just saving there, and you know, you have all these different drawing files that you're using. I want to talk about something really different and perhaps a little boring, but file management. So if there's a comic book artist out there watching either with us now live, whether it's on here, on Twitch, or over on Instagram, um, are there any pitfalls or advice you would give when it comes to managing all the different, whether it's if they're using Photoshop like yourself, or if they're maybe using clip art or clip studio, Procreate, when it comes to actually saving all these files and managing them, is there anything that you would suggest, or any pitfalls you would have someone starting out avoid?
Well, I mean, I can't say I'm the best when it comes to. I mean, I do. I have a file management system. I can't say I'm like super methodical about it. And like one of the things that I know you should do, and I do to a degree, but I don't do completely, is naming all your layers. When you're working.
Yep.
I do name them for the most part, but if I'm, because I'm working with myself, and generally speaking, if there's something on there that I'm going to need to remember later down the line, I may like label it with something specific, so that if I go back to it a year or two later, I'll be like, oh, okay, that's what I was doing for this file, like, or for this layer or something. When it comes to file management, I mean, very basic stuff is make sure you have more than one backup. I mean, that's like a thing that a lot of beginners don't do, is that they have their hard drive, like their computer they're working on, and that's it. And if your computer crashes for whatever reason, you lost everything. So if you're working, especially when you have clients, you want to make sure you have more than one backup. I'm always working. I've got 3 backups.
Whoa, awesome.
I've got 3, and that's taken me a while. I used to just be 1, then it was 2, now it's 3, right? One of the things that I was told to do is I have 2 external hard drives that's just purely dedicated to, basically it's all the stuff that I'm working on currently, right? For the most part.
Okay, yeah.
And so, I switch off on those every other day, every few days. I switch back and forth, because hypothetically, if you're hacked on a particular day, you want to make sure, if you're, and like this is worst case scenario, but if somebody hacks you on that day, and they freeze your computer, and what's on your, they somehow, get into your hard drive, external hard drive, you may not be able to get access to it. It's corrupted. Well, if you have something, an older external just for 2 days ago, you're losing that day or 2 days of work.
But right? Not the whole project.
But not the whole project. That's one. I also have a cloud-based as well. Now, again, hoping that the cloud-based doesn't get hacked, So these are all kind of like, it's redundancies, but it's when you have a client and you're you have some freak accident happening, you have a fire in your house, well, you want to have a cloud backup, right? You have
exactly.
As I said, something happens to your computer, or it gets corrupted for some reason, you have an older version externally that hopefully isn't corrupted, right? So that's one big huge thing that a lot of people don't do when they begin, is that backing up of their file. Then, and just to explain what I'm doing right now, I'm just, since we're going to be doing something a little bit more finished, I'm just taking that the image I was working on, putting it on what's an adjustment layer, and fading it down. So I've created I like an orange line. It could be a blue line. It doesn't really matter. But now I'm going to create another layer where I'm going to ink on top of it, and I can zoom in a little bit more, and it's a little bit more of a finish line I'm going to be working on. Anyway, so like one of the things that I do when I start a project is I'll usually, before I even draw anything, I will organize my files. I'll actually go through, and let's say with saltwater, I just create like a folder for the new issue, and then I'll create a folder for I don't know if I'm trying to think if I can show you if I'm not going to be
Yeah, don't get yourself in
yeah,
trouble.
I don't want to. Yeah, but so hopefully this explaining it will be enough. And so I will create like a folder for saltwater issue number 5. Then what I'll do is within that folder, I'll go, okay, I've got pages, I've got JPEGs, I've got like printing, I've got Illustrator files. And so I've organized them in a way where it's easy for me to access when I'm, let's say, so for example, and a lot of this is trial and error. I have a file where it's just the pages broken down by page, and within each of those page files is like a PSD, which is a Photoshop file, and a reference file, which I put all my references into. And then separate, I used to put like other files in there, like other saved like JPEGs and stuff, but I stopped doing that, and I actually created a file specifically outside of pages just for JPEGs. Because what I find is if I want to, it's easier for me to, when I'm doing like, let's say Illustrator, for me to just drop those JPEGs into the Illustrator file, because otherwise I have to go into each individual page file. Whereas if it's all in one folder under JPEGs, it's just easier for me to, especially when I'm going through the whole process of like laying out the page, to have it all easily accessible. It's a little thing, but, you know, when some of this stuff becomes a little bit monotonous especially when you're, you know, like putting the book together. It doesn't take like brain science, but it's a repeated process that if you mess up one little thing, you may not realize it, and then later down you're like, that page isn't the right page there. What happened here, or something, you know? So it just makes it a little easier, one less thing for you to have to think about. And then like the naming of files. I'll usually do something where, so I don't know, because I work within Apple or Mac. I've never really had difficulty finding the file again, because I'll label it with the name, and then I'll put like the page number, or, you know, if it's a date or something like that, I'll do that. Some people may have a different way of doing it, where it's a little, maybe they give it like a more specific name, or I don't know, like again, everybody's, or they may color code. Like, I don't do that really.
I've seen that with layers, and like within Premiere Pro for video editing, I can color code layers and certain things. I find that interesting, but I've never had the need, I guess, to get that tiny with it, and that way it just sort of, I feel like the effort of doing it, especially for the stuff that I do, wouldn't make it useful. But yeah, I think the color coding is really interesting.
Yeah, I have color coded at times when I'm organizing, like if I'm organizing reference, and I just, you know, like if I want to like go, okay, all the green color coded ones are the ones I really like. The yellow ones are the ones that I want to get rid of maybe. And the blue ones are the ones that I want to give to somebody, or something like, you know, something like that, where you're maybe not, where you need to have like an organized system, so that you're, you know, you can easily do a process or something. You know, I mean, there's also other programs like Adobe Bridge, that you can use to organize and see all of your images and stuff like that, which I don't really use, but you know, I mean, I'm sure there's creators that may use Bridge or something like that, so they can see all of their pages organized in a very easy way. I don't do that though. Yeah, and that's pretty much it when it comes to my file, the way I file stuff. I find that it works enough. It works well enough for me that if I go back to like something from 3 or 4 years ago, I can find things I need pretty easily, because I know I have a pretty good idea of where things are. And the ones that are older than that, like where the filing isn't as tight as that,
yeah.
I'm going, oh, what was I doing here? I don't remember. So, you're constantly like working to improve it. And I don't know, what do you do? Do you have like anything in particular, any system you use?
Yeah, so like for me, talking about redundant drives, I have a few. So I have my main working drive, which I call the Bat drive, aptly named. I then have another hard drive, which is actually a gaming hard drive. It's meant for use with like PlayStations and stuff, but I find it's got really good processing speed, and for video editing, because someone could be like, "Hey, Konrad, I need a 60-second clip that's got 5 scenes in it, like 5 cuts or 5 sources," and they're like, "I'm just gonna send you the 5 that we filmed," and like each of those could be 2 gigabytes. So I'm like, okay, so I need to be able to relatively quickly and easily work with 10 gigabytes of information, pull them, source them out of the drive into the folder. Then I make proxies for them, which is basically Premiere Pro going, what's the absolute smallest resolution I can make a file version of this in, and then show you that to work on, and then when we're done, relink it, and it's all high end. But like because of that, a lot of backups, and then I find for me, the way I've done it is I'll have like a master, say a client, right? So I'll have main file, client name, Ashley, one of my clients I work with. From within Ashley's folder, then it'll be like episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, and if you open episode 1, I'll have scene 1, and I'll have dropped all the raw files for that. And then once I'm done working on that scene, I actually create another folder, and I'm like, I'll call it parts, and I'll put all those individual files into that, and then I will save the scene in Premiere Pro, or in your case, like it'd be like Photoshop, like a page basically, and I'll save that, and then depending on how big the file ends up being, I might do individual files for each scene. Sometimes though, I'm lucky enough that I can have the processor handle all of it at once, so I can continue working on that file, but I'll keep that saved state of scene 1, and then as I start working on, say, scene 2, again, I start with the same scene 1 working file, and I'll just add on to it, save it as scene 2, and that way I, just like you're talking about with the sort of the redundancies, what if something goes wrong, even if I lose a day of editing, which would totally suck, but like it's better than losing the whole project. So I have those sort of staggered, here's what we've got, here's what we've got. And then for me, what I normally do is just so I have easy access to stuff. Once I've done all the work, right? I've finished all the scenes, it's all together, I have the final video of the episode. I pull back out to the episode 1, and I'll save just the final cut, and I'll call it like episode 1 final cut, or rather I do like cut 1.0, set it out for revisions, and then keep working on it. But that way, yeah, it's like if someone's like, hey, can you send me the file for the finished episode, I could just go, cool, client's name is Ashley, it's episode 1, there it is, send it. But then if they're like, oh, hey, can you tweak this small part of this scene, I can go into that scene, I can then go in and further get more and more granular as I need to. That's how I've been doing it.
Yeah.
And then just, continue to make sort of backup upon backup. Because I am very aware, I've been told that these things tend to die after 7 or 8 years. And, well, this one's 7. So I'm like, it's going to happen, and I'm going to be upset about it, but I'll be okay.
Yeah, you just have to find like a Robin one or something.
That's, you know what? Now that you said that, that's what I'm gonna do. It'll be the Robin drive. Yeah. And I'll have the Batgirl drive, and then maybe the Alfred drive.
Yeah. Have you ever worked in intraweb? Like shared a system, shared a filing system with other people?
Not yet. Where you can actually access the file and open it and stuff.
Yeah. So like I've been in jobs where you have people that all can access the same files, so you kind of have to make sure
Oh.
there's like a universal system in place where people, so if you're creating a new file, they kind of have to know what it is that you're doing so they can find it, right?
Ooh. I haven't yet, although that sounds fascinating. Um, I'm curious because I'm assuming when you've done this work, it's been through art just because of you and what you do.
Yeah.
Um, but like, is it the kind of thing where because of the type of file, if you were actively working in it, they could open it and like see what you're doing, like a Google Doc, or is it more like I'm gonna be working on it from hour X to Y, so don't touch it because then I'll save it and it'll get updated after Z or whatever.
So this was back in 2000. I worked when I was working at a toy company that we had this like an intranet as opposed to
Yep.
internet. And as far as I recall, uh, they couldn't see live you working on it. I think there was a bit of a lag because, again, like speeds of processing have gotten much better in the last 20 some years. So at that time, I think it would be more like they had to wait 10 or 15 minutes after I finished,
Oh, okay.
then they can access it. And then, I don't think it was instantaneous. I could be wrong. But that's my memory of it. And really, at the end of the day, there wasn't a lot of people accessing. I was just curious to know if you've done that because, yeah, in that situation. And actually, no, that's not true. When I was working on the Disney movies, I think we had something like that where when you were done with a file, you had to upload it. It was a like closed cloud system.
Yeah.
I wonder if
I
they were able to see it. That was a question I think we had. Like, could you see things being worked on? I think possibly yes, but because it's kind of like somebody micromanaging you,
yeah.
there is no need for. But I mean, the whole idea behind that is you're creating a system that everybody, you have to make sure everybody understands like what the hierarchy of your whatever the root of like where the basic beginning of this like tree system is, right?
Oh God,
this is
yeah.
this is where all of these files where everything starts, and then you have like all these things branching off, especially if you're working on like a movie or an animation, where you have everybody doing different parts to create one whole thing. So you I think in that situation you have to have a very organized system because
Oh
people
yeah.
need to be able to know if they need to find like a specific file, they need to know what it that they have to understand. Like, hopefully you wouldn't have to say what it is. They would just go, okay, this was for this show, for the this cartoon, this show, for under backgrounds, and I'm looking for specific types of backgrounds, right? You would
Mhm.
know exactly what it is that you're looking for, and because people have labeled it properly or it's already been created by somebody else and you're just coming in and adding to
Follow
it.
the system, yeah.
Yeah. So I have worked in that way too. I actually forgot about that, but um, it's yeah. So I think I learned a bit of that kind of file system process from working in that way, where you have to think. I mean, and this is a horrible thought, so I hope my parents aren't watching right now. But I mean, if something happens to me, or like if something happens
Yeah.
to me, my wife needs to be able to find some of these files, right? We've talked about that before. If God forbid, something happens that she's
Yeah.
a client that needs access to something, she needs to be able to know where to find it, right? And that's kind of the thinking you need to have. If let's say, or even hypothetically, you get in a car accident and you're in the hospital and you're trying to explain to your significant other where something is, right? Because you can't get access to it because
Yeah.
it's not in the cloud. Let's say it's actually on a on your computer and maybe an external hard drive. Um, they may need to be able to find it.
Yeah, exactly. And I do want to take a quick second for the folks viewing. If you happen to be a little younger, you may not know the word intranet. You just might hear internet. Intranet is basically when, say, a company, Disney would be a fantastic example,
Yeah.
will have enough computers connected together, but not from the internet or Wi-Fi, actually from cables that are all throughout this whole building into a server. Basically, if Keith was on one of these computers, he'd be able to access files from all these other computers because they're on a intranet. So when it's isolated like that, it's an intranet.
And the
Just
other
if you
and the
were
other
a little
thing
younger.
from an intranet is that you're not taking any of that work home with you, right?
Yeah, it's
Especially
just there.
when you're dealing with something that's copywritten and it's an important intellectual property. You can't be taking it home unless you're. I mean, that's not true. You might take it home, but you have to have permission to do it,
Yeah.
and they have to trust that you're not going to be able that your system at home is a closed system, right? And so like you have to be very careful when you're working on a property that if somehow it gets leaked, if somebody hacks into your own personal computer and you have, scenes or something from a movie, script or something on your computer, you can get in huge trouble, right? So you have to be. That's one of the reasons why they do have these intranets at a work, so that you're not taking something home that because you're not bringing your own computer with you. You're using their computers, and if you do have your own computer with that, you have to make sure you have the security on it that really probably more security that you would than your own personal computer.
Oh God, yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. Like it's funny because like we're talking about cybersecurity at that point and like how you need to be safe. You have to have redundancies with hard drives and all this stuff. And then I think about like the old school comics where like, you know, I don't know, any given artist, heck, Todd McFarlane hypothetically could have been like, I really got to get home today, but I'm not quite done this drawing. So I'm going to take these. I'm going to put them into a portfolio bag, and I'm going to hop on the bus, and I'll tram home, and I'll finish it up at home. And that could be like, the newest issue of Spawn or whatever crazy thing he was working on at that time. And it's just like, man, like prior to like mass cybersecurity and digitalization, like people were just walking around with files that were like hyper important in a briefcase.
Well, I mean, yeah, like there was a time when I believe both Marvel and DC were their main headquarters were in New York City, and
Yep.
a lot of the creators would work from Marvel or DC's offices, right? And then, I'm sure there were creators that would work from home. But it did start to change when like it became much more of a global when Marvel and DC started really globalizing
Mm-hmm.
their with creators that they've used, and I mean they did have like creators from other countries. Lots of Filipino creators were Marvel and DC. So obviously, that it did exist where somebody would be working in another country and would have to mail in their work, right? And they'd have to. I mean, I never had to deal with that, so I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to have somebody to talk to about what that's like to you're FedExing. Actually, I mean, I did work where when I was at the toy company where you would like FedEx a mock-up of your what that would eventually have to go into production, and you would FedEx it to like Hong Kong and the stress of like getting it to the FedEx before they closed, so that you can get it to I think it was San Francisco. We had another office in San Fran, so being able to get to San Fran, on time, so that they can actually make sure that the packaging you created would work with that they could actually mass market it, right? And a lot of this stuff was on a very like a scheduled timeline. So it's the same thing. You're dealing with a monthly comic book. You have to hope that I'm imagining that some of the creators would probably make photocopies of everything that they did.
Oh.
Now I know there was a time when they started sometime in the 80s. I think that they were like, at least, was it DC or Marvel? I can't remember which company started giving back all the pages. And then, when you're dealing with like when digital became a thing, you can actually just scan your illustration in, or your page, your sequential page in, and then it'd be high res, and you can email it to somebody, right? So that changed it too. But there was a time when for sure a lot of those pages would be mailed to the the Marvel or DC, and if something happened to them on the way, if they get damaged or lost, I don't know. I'm not sure. It's a question to ask some of these older creators that had to deal with that kind of, with the traditional being shipped in. Like, did they know or ever have a situation where they had their work lost? Right? And I'm sure it's happened.
Yeah. Well, I'm so curious about this now. Like, I've Googled it. So according to Wikipedia, and Wrightson's Warren Days, written by John B. Cook, in 1975 or 76 is when both DC and Marvel began returning those artists' original pages. Also, Keith, it sounds like we're outside of the club and you're inside the club. Like, there's no trouble.
What, my sound?
Yeah.
Sound is off? Or
it's not that it's... Oh. Say something? There we go. Okay. You're good. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, like I'm a fairly nervous person, right? And like the idea that someone could have like mocked up this cover, right? Mm-hmm. And then be like, cool, I need to get this to the printer. So they, like you said, they have to probably 9x11. They got to put it in a bag and then reinforce it and FedEx it off or whatever. And then like some careless FedEx employee could just like bend it in half by accident, sit on it, and I'm just like, oh my god, like my brain explodes at the idea. Yeah, that would be wild.
Yeah, I mean, these are some of the beautiful things about working digitally, I guess, is that you don't have to worry about that, or having a digital component to, even if you're working traditionally, which there's still a bunch of artists that do that. That they don't have to like actually ship the work in, but again, like it's all technology can be a beautiful thing, and it can be a thing that's not so good, right?
Yeah,
especially with the AI. So
absolutely. As a heads up, Keith, you've got 5.5 minutes until 8. Now, I have a funny story related to my interview show. So, quite possibly still in the chat with us in the word failed me, Instagram, is Roberto Villacava, and I'm hoping I'm saying his name right. He makes a book called The Voyager, and it's on... I believe he's working on the third one. He's been kickstarting them. Solid, cool book. I really like the art. And foolishly, because of his name, when he contacted me, I assumed, and like in his bio, it said, he's from, oh God, where is it? I believe Europe, somewhere in Europe. I was like, oh, cool. So he's European. He's reaching out. And I'm like, yeah, he's an indie guy. I'll gladly review his books and stuff. And to talk about small world, I ran into someone recently, and we were just, chit chatting and stuff about local indie people, and I'm trying to figure out who's in whose friend circle and who knows each other when it comes to all these indie artists that I've talked to. And someone was like, "Oh yeah, like Roberto Villacava," and I was like, "Wait, you know him?" And he's like, "Yeah, we hang out." And I'm like, "Wait, what? Because you're local to here?" And he's like, "Yeah. Dude's just like down in Niagara." And I was like, "Excuse me?" He's like, "Yeah, he lives in Niagara somewhere, and he comes up to do stuff." And I was like, "You got to be kidding me! Like, I'm from Niagara, like that's where he's." And the guy was like, "Yeah, he moved over, like just I think pre-pandemic." And it was just one of those things where I was like, I'm thinking to myself, son of a bee. Like, I could have met with him in person. We could have done like a cool interview at a shop somewhere. But yeah, it goes to show you the world is a tiny, small, very close together little thing, even though it is so massive and so wild, and there's so many people on it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And especially now that we have this, and you can talk to somebody in another time zone and do an interview, right? Like it's as long as their time zone isn't so difficult for them to coordinate with yours.
Oh, 100%. Well, that's like I'm talking about that. I had a buddy of mine, dear friend. He's gotten me a number of comics. He's also huge into comics. While I lived in Hong Kong and he lived here, he was like, "What if we did like a show together?" And I was like, "Let's do it." So I would wake up. We were 13 hours behind, I think, at the time in Hong Kong. So I would wake up bright and early at like 8 in the morning on a Sunday or a Saturday, and he'd be meeting me at like, I think it's 13 hours at that time. So he would be meeting me at his like 10, and we'd sit down and basically record a conversation for like an hour here and there. And yeah, it can be a challenge, but it's doable. And like when it comes to sharing conversation with someone, getting to check out someone drawing a really cool character that you like, or working and sharing files, sometimes the internet just did some good stuff for the world, and I love that.
Mm-hmm. So, and I'm pretty much done here. So there we go.
Yeah, I love it. So, drawing Mega Man, what would you rate it out of 10? 10 being absolutely fantastic, 1 being super boring and unoriginal. Where would you put it?
Probably like a 3 or a 4. Not really.
Love it.
Really, I mean, like the characters. That's not to say that
he's not a complicated character. He's just
like if I knew the character's personality a little bit more, and you're having to like do storytelling with a character and they're emoting and stuff, there may be some really fun poses you can put them in. So like this as a singular static image I've done, like it's not a lot of, it's not really complicated. If there was more, if there was more things to it, it would have probably been a little bit more of a challenge in regards to like figuring out what something looked like at a different angle and stuff. But I mean, I can't say I didn't enjoy it. It was fun to draw this character. So, I don't know if I'd ever draw him again, but it was, I did enjoy the process.
We'll see.
We'll see.
That's awesome. Well, Keith, we're going to actually wrap up right on time. Once again, thank you so much for coming, hanging out, doing some sketchy goodness with me, and talking about data management and shipping files and all sorts of good stuff tonight.
No, it's sometimes those are things people need to hear, right? So it's the more mundane stuff can be very helpful.
Absolutely. And to the folks at home, one, like the video, comment what you think of Mega Man in general, what you think of Keith's drawing of Mega Man, what you think about file management and how you like to do it. Make sure you subscribe for more. And if you click the links down below, you can access Keith's site. You can support the show. You could throw a couple bucks our way if you feel so inclined, which might help pay for subscriptions for Keith, myself, for the streaming service, whatever you feel like doing. But however you've come to the stream, whether you're with us now live or into the future, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Golden age to present, digest to oversize. Never miss new comic day. Yeah, no surprise. So where's my no prize? Check the letter columns. Can't find issue 2. Collector problems, cliffhangers.